Before we jump into the episode, I want to talk to you about Drops and Collect by Soul Savvy. With Drops and Collect, you're able to stay ahead of the game. Using Drops, you can enter raffles and set alerts for any and all restocks, and it will help you never miss a release ever again. And after you cop some fresh kicks, use Collect to manage your collection. I'm still in the process of adding my kicks to Collect. But what's really cool about Collect is you can also make trades with other current users of Collect. And if you're a member, there's no fees. But if you aren't a member, don't worry about it. You just have to pay a flat rate of $8 per trade. Now, how do you get these apps? Just use the links in the description of this podcast. Download these apps and grow your collection by helping this podcast at the same time. That's right. Use the links in the description and start expanding your collection today. Hey D, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Thank
Yeah.
you for, oh man, it's my pleasure to be here.
No, this is a huge honor. I'm trying to remember exactly because I know I added you first on LinkedIn, and I was like, oh my god, your resume was like crazy. I just like so sneaker based and just like the I'm such like this whole podcast is about storytelling and people's stories with sneakers, not what the brands are telling us, but the stories that we hear about what sneakers mean to people and the journeys they put them on. But like you and OSD, like I jumped into the Facebook group immediately after I added you. I was just like, I gotta jump into this because I just my bad. Sorry for stealing the whole beginning, but like,
It's all good.
but like the idea of the sneaker community and sneaker culture was what brought me in
Mm.
was people's stories. So like, yeah, I just had to say that in the beginning.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I do. Man,
the But for people who aren't familiar with you, how about you introduce yourself?
absolutely. Well, my name is Dijong Wells. Everyone knows me as D Wells, D Wells OSD, obsessive sneaker disorder.
Hmm.
It's a non-curable disease that I've had since 1979 and counting. And you know, sneakers, I use them just like photographs to timestamp, who I was with, what I was doing, where I was in the world, what was
Hmm.
going on in the world, even, be it politics, be it music and the culture. So sneakers are something that I've always enjoyed, certainly obsessed over, had more pairs of sneakers than I knew how to count.
Hmm.
I know the question always comes up. People say, how many pairs of sneakers do you own?
Yeah.
Well, right now I have more than 2 years worth sitting, but I probably own well over 4,000 pairs of sneakers.
Holy smokes. That is wild.
Yeah,
That is wild.
it's
That is
crazy.
wild.
So OSD is real.
I I want to say like if led to my own devices, I would probably be up that much. But like
Yeah,
when you got to pay a bill, like I'm still part of the like when I need to pay a bill or something, one's got to go. So like yeah, that's where that's where I
you do what you got to
am.
do, man. It's a complete, and I always say this is completely, it's a legal hustle. I'd rather you or any person. I'd rather you do that, sell a pair of sneakers, than to do something that can end up, wind you up in jail,
Hmm.
hurt, killed. It's not, in this day and age now, you can flip anything. I mean, we see it all the time from eBay to Marketplace to Instagram to TikTok. People are buying and flipping everything from Pokemon cards to Garbage Pail Kid cards or whatever. So why not sneakers, you know?
No, yeah, for sure. Totally agree. It's a good hustle. I mean, it gets overblown and people get so upset because I've said this plenty of times. When it comes to something that you're passionate about, you think that it's personally affecting you because you can't get something, right?
Exactly.
So if you have like just the mindset of just like it's all right, there's another pair. It doesn't have to be this pair. You'll be fine, you know.
Exactly. Exactly. But
Uh,
people are into everything nowadays. I mean, be it sneakers, be it clothing, be it, graphic t-shirts,
mhm.
whatever it is, hats, steins, stamps, you name it.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, there's total like vintage collecting has taken such a huge leap in since the pandemic. Like
Exactly.
it's 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 just so wild because like I recently, because I live in New York, so I went to a thrift shop, and I'm thinking like it's just like a regular thrift shop, and then I walk in and I'm like, it's a thrift shop for nothing but high fashion. So like it had like off-white thrifted, it had like I was just like this, so I'm like, oh, maybe I'll get like thrift shop prices. No, it's all
Uh,
like it's basically I'm paying for like if I went to like Bergdorf and Goodman, just being like
oh,
it was absolutely nuts. But let's
mm,
just jump into the question. And
yes,
it's the
sir.
question the question that I ask everybody each week. And that question is, what's your first kicks? What's that first pair of sneakers you absolutely needed
Oh,
to
that
have?
that first pair of sneakers had to be the Nike Cortez, the Forrest Gumps, as people call them.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things that grabbed my attention. We're talking, geez, such an early age. One of them saved up my money for them. Fast forward, was able to buy a pair. I mean, I'm literally holding a pair from 1982
Mm-hmm.
box. It's been beat up. I've carried this thing all over. You can see the tape all over, but nonetheless, 2184 leather Cortez,
It's
you know,
wild.
crazy in the original box, made in Korea. Um, when I say you see the glue all over them from on the heel. Um, I mean, just he just oozed classic, classic, Nike Cortez. This pair particularly, um, I had to hunt down this pair because this
Mm-hmm.
the sneakers I had when I was a kid. So I had to hunt down a wearable pair.
Mm-hmm.
Not dare put these on now, but these are from 1982, and they also happen to be in a size 14, as
14.
we're able to see, which is my size. So
Mm-hmm.
1982 size 14, made in Korea. Yeah, these are the ones. This is where it began.
That's where it began. I'm gonna read a little synopsis real quick
Yeah.
about the shoe. I'm reading it off of Sotheby's, so it's
But
probably gonna be a little bit gussied up just for prosperity's sake.
okay.
The Nike Cortez was one of the first Nike shoes ever made and came out in 1972, the first year of Nike. Originally made for runners, the style transcends sports and has been featured in films such as Forrest Gump and Charlie's Angels. 49 years later, the sneaker remains a brand favorite. The name Cortez results from a response to the Adidas style Aztec, an historical reference to Cortez conquering the Aztecs. Okay, I did not know that. That's wild.
Yeah, yeah.
and
Shots fired.
let's see. White upper. It has a white upper, varsity red swoosh and heel tab, varsity blue and white midsole, and we see the box styles numbers 2184. Yeah,
Yep.
amazing. That shoe, I mean, as soon as you pulled them out and showed them to me earlier before we jumped on, yeah, wild. As soon as you pulled them out, show I was like the Forrest Gumps, and it reminds me of so like if you go to Bubba Gump,
Mm.
you can put your foot into Forrest Gump's shoes, and it's
Ah,
Nike Cortez's because they have like a bench that you can sit on for a photo op. So it
wow.
that I was just like, oh snap! I remember those. What I guess like how did you? Why was it that shoe, and how did you like? Did you get the? How did you get the money to get it or that time during
Man,
that time?
I just remember just seeing these sneakers, they're white, red with a little bit of blue, but that red swoosh is what grabbed my attention right off the bat. I mean, it
Hmm.
was so different, it was so unique at the time. I mean, I was accustomed to seeing a lot of Pro Keds and Converse. And again, we're talking, in 1982, there was a lot of Skippies even back then. So this brand, Nike, or Nike, as people would say in the Caribbean, in the Virgin Islands where I was born and raised, it just spoke to me. They really, really did. And I just remember I wanted them so badly. My parents would refuse to spend that kind of money for them. I don't remember exactly how much they cost at the time, but
Hmm.
I knew they were expensive. And my parents were not having. They were like, "Listen, if you really want these sneakers, you're gonna have to go and work for them." So I mean, everything from delivering newspapers to bagging groceries at the grocery store, doing whatever chores I could do extra for any and everyone. That's how I was able to save up the money. I eventually got a pair at a store called Cosmopolitan, which used to be on the waterfront in St. Thomas. And
Hmm.
Man, you would think those things were gold because I would clean them with the toothbrush with my, Dawn dishwashing liquid, toothbrush, water,
Hmm.
clean them, change the laces, scrub the laces, put them on the line to dry with some Clorox, get them nice white again. And then eventually like adding the fat laces to them. So I'd add, the big fat uh, white and red laces, and I would
Hmm.
switch them out depending on what outfit I was wearing. So it was all, we call it from the feet up. I didn't know what it was at the time. I just knew that sneakers were the thing for me at an early age. And I've been fortunate enough, blessed enough to be able to like turn my obsession with sneakers
Hmm.
to a career and something that I get to do all day, every day. I mean, I get to talk about sneakers all the time. And
Hmm.
it's amazing, even people who reach out to me, like yourself, who say, "Hey, listen, join me in my show. Let's talk some sneakers." And I'm like, bet, I'm in, count me in. So
No, yeah, I love that. I mean, get starting this up and getting that same opportunity is like I could talk sneakers all day. Like it's my through line with anybody to start a conversation or like
exactly.
it's I mean I because like I was talking about work before we jumped on here, and now I'm being known as the sneaker guy in
Mm,
a corporate office. So everybody like now it's like I was in a meeting recently and somebody was just like, "So, did you get any new sneakers this week?" I'm like, "Oh man, here we go." So they'd be like,
go.
"Oh," so they're like, "Yeah, show them." And like, I have to, I go into the closet, I grab my Run the Jewels SBs, and I'm just like, "Yeah, these are Run the Jewels, such and such," and I tell them about it.
Yeah.
But how did you? I'm so curious of like, how did you like turn when you were in the Caribbean, right?
Mhm.
Am I saying that right? I feel like I
Yeah.
say that. Is it
Yeah, you can,
okay?
you can say
Yeah.
the Virgin Islands. Yeah.
Yeah. When you were on the islands, like the uh like how do you were you just like, all right, I gotta get into the US and start doing this thing? Or are
Mhm.
you just like, you know what, I'm gonna figure it out how to do it here? Like what was your first steps? Because
Yeah, there weren't many sneaker, stores, even athletic stores in the Virgin Islands. The big place for us to go, really, and this is kind of crazy when I really say it out loud. We would fly from St. Thomas to Puerto Rico, which is only a 25-minute flight
hmm.
to go shopping because Puerto Rico had all the big malls and all the big stores. So they
Hmm.
had, you know, the athlete's foot, they had the mom and pop stores, you had the big mall, you had either had Plaza Las Americas or you had the mall in Rio Pedras, and we would just go over. I'd go over with some friends. It would cost us maybe, I remember being as inexpensive as $80 round trip from St. Thomas to Puerto Rico.
Wow.
You took, a couple $100. Took the flight, you jumped in the cab, went to the mall, you shopped all day, you ate food that you normally wouldn't get, which they had the huge eatery.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was a true mall experience. We didn't have that in St. Thomas. We didn't
Right.
even have that in St. John, and certainly in St. Croix either. So going to Puerto Rico was like my big kind of escape. And
Hmm.
then when the family and I were able to travel to the continental United States, to New York City, to Orlando, to Miami, to Chicago. Then it was like I'm looking through the yellow pages. I'm like, yo, I gotta find all the sneaker stores because I gotta hit as many as I can in this short period of time. And that was what I came. I was intended to buy at least one pair. And if I walked out of there or flew back home with two, I was a happy camper. Like that's where my money went, all to sneakers and clothes, but particularly to sneakers.
That
Yeah.
is I mean that's beautiful, to be honest. I'll tell you, because like you're on an island surrounded
Yeah.
by water, and you're like, this is where people are I'm pretty sure, because like when I go, because I'm half Brazilian, so like I'll go back to Brazil, and so people would be like, I'm like, oh, I gotta, I'm the one that wants to wear sneakers, so, and everybody's there flip-flops because
Yeah.
you're by the water all the time. You never know when it's time to just jump in the water. So it's like I'm pretty sure you had that same experience of like,
Oh,
you want sneakers, like
yeah, exactly. Look at me like I'm the crazy one, but it's okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how again we took something that no one really paid much attention to. Yeah, they were used for their intended purpose, right? They were used for
Mhm,
tennis or basketball or football, soccer,
mhm,
and they just, they became that thing that I would literally look at people's feet. I remember even being in Puerto Rico, looking at people's feet, going through the airport, going, okay, what brands am I seeing? What ones do I recognize? What ones did I not recognize? I mean, when I saw brands like Diadora or Eles,
Hmm.
um, uh, off brands like Lecoq Sportif. Like I
Hmm.
remember watching tennis matches with my parents. My parents were big into tennis, and that's where it really began for sneakers, is because my parents were playing tennis and they're wearing Rod Laver and Stan Smith, both of them wearing Adidas.
Hmm.
But my father particularly was this, you know, big on Arthur Ashe. Like he loved Arthur Ashe. And he's wearing these sneakers called the Coq Sportif. And I was like, what does that even mean? Like, what's that brand? And finding out that it's Parisian, it's from France and blah blah blah. And here's this black man on my TV, black and white TV, playing tennis in Wimbledon and winning, and just the way he did it. And he just looked so classy. He was a
Hmm.
classy, man wearing this brand. Then fast forward to Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, and he's Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince are wearing this huge Lecoq Sportif sweatsuit.
Hmm.
I was like, oh, I recognize that brand because of Arthur Ashe back in the day. We're fat. I mean, Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince. We're talking 1987,
Right.
wearing the sweatsuits, right? So it
Hmm.
was just everything came full circle. Like, again, I never intended to be in the footwear industry. I tried to work at Nike. They basically shot me down, said I didn't have enough experience because I was a lowly, college student. Nonetheless, I've been able to do some amazing, cool stuff in the footwear, athletic footwear arena.
No, yeah. Before we jump into that, for sure,
Yeah.
the I'm very curious. Where like, so then, did you come to the States for college, and you were just like, I'm working it. I'm going for footwear, like, and then or like you're just like, or what was your aspect of like, all right,
Mhm.
this is the lane I'm gonna take within this, and I'm gonna figure this out. Like, what was your motivation, and what was your game plan in that
Yeah.
time?
So my game plan was really, I was inspired to leave the Virgin Islands and leave the islands and head off to the States
Hmm.
for college. And that goal was something, that seed was planted at an early age from my parents and family. It's mom was a public school teacher, dad was a fireman, and education was certainly encouraged. You have to do I had to do well in school, had to apply myself, but also, they also encouraged me to have fun, play sports and
Hmm.
hang out with my friends and stuff like that. And unfortunately, even though I aspired to leave the Virgin Islands, my father unexpectedly died my
Oh, damn.
senior year of high school, actually 2 weeks before my 18th birthday.
Hmm.
And I really, I really thought at that point I wasn't going to leave. I wasn't going to leave my mother. I wasn't going to leave my family behind after having, just lost my father. But my
Hmm.
mother, the strong woman that she is, the educator that she is, she's like, no, you've always wanted to leave the islands and go off to college. And she encouraged me to still do that, and I did. So I left the Virgin Islands and went to school in Rhode Island, of all places, the smallest state in the continental United States.
Yeah.
Um, and studied business at Bryant. It's now Bryant University in Smithfield, Rhode
Hmm.
Island. It used to be Bryant College, and just about 20 minutes outside of downtown Providence. So close to Johnson and Wales, Rhode Island School of Design, Brown
Hmm.
University, things like that. And
What was that culture shock like?
it because of the exposure again from the family and growing up in the Caribbean and having to deal with a lot of tourism in the
Hmm.
Virgin Islands, right? Everything was based upon tourism. So I knew how to interact with people of all different shapes, sizes, and colors. But moving to Rhode Island was big because all of a sudden instead of being in a predominantly black and brown community,
Hmm.
I truly was a minority, if you want to, for lack of a better word. And I also realized a lot of people in the New England area hadn't traveled. Like I had been to more places and knew more about their region than they knew. And I'm like, okay, so you do realize Providence was known as the Providence Plantation, right? Because of the slave trade. They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, look at the full name. Like, and this is pre-internet days now.
Yeah.
So you have to go to the encyclopedia and go to the library and do your research, right?
You're over there
So
like, I'm gonna give you the Dewey Decimal numbers real quick. Oh, here you
exactly.
go.
So we're talking about, so it was culture shock, but at the same time, I love my experience was good. I was open to all these different experiences. I went up to parts of like New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont that I had only read about in books.
Mhm.
Um, for me, it was being close to, I really wanted to go to school in New York. Like my goal was to be at Columbia University, but unfortunately, I got waitlisted there and I was going to go to Bryant and transfer, never did. But there's a reason, I say God doesn't make any mistakes. There's a reason why I ended up at Bryant.
Mhm.
There's a reason why I was able to meet and become friends and lifelong friends, meet my future wife. Also, great experiences came out of that. And still yet be close enough because I would be able to, get back and forth between Rhode Island and New York City, by car in 3.5, 4 hours, by
Mhm.
train or bus, call it five. It was easy. I'd get my fix though. I would get I call it, get my New York City vibe fix on it
Yeah.
because there's an energy about New York City that is undeniable. I remember times driving and being tired, but as soon as I hit like New Haven, I could pick up the New York radio stations.
Yeah.
The
The
heart is a different beat.
the vibe is called rushed. Because
I like that. I like that. I'm gonna have to use that. I will use that, and I'll give you credit for that rush. But it's
because
but it's true. There is a different
yeah.
vibe. So and then that New York City. I mean, it is the mecca for fashion and sneakers. Like, I mean, everything from being downtown Brooklyn, which is where I would go and do all my sneaker shopping, or
Mhm.
I'd troop up to the Bronx, Fordham Road, because I had my cousins up there, and they'd be like, "Yo, come visit." So I'd go up there and visit them, but I had to go hit all the sneaker stores too, man,
Right.
and get sneakers or look at the sneakers that weren't available in other parts of the city.
Mhm.
Like, be it different Puma Clydes, or be it different Nike sneakers, Adidas shell toes that all of a sudden you're like, oh, these aren't available. These snake skin ones here in the Bronx aren't available in any other borough. Why is
Mhm.
that? Like, so New York is a whole nother vibe. Rhode Island was a different vibe, but nonetheless, it
Were
helped shape
were
who I
you
am.
around when, like, in the early 90s, like Bobito and
Oh
Clark
yeah.
Kent was going around
Oh.
New York City just collecting, like,
And I would I was, I mean, I technically moved in 1991 from the Virgin Islands to Brooklyn, right? Like that
mhm.
was my first move, and then going to college. But my other home base was Brooklyn, New York. Like
Mm.
that was where I would go, during the summertime or long weekends or whatever from school. And I heard about Bobito because I heard about him from his ball playing,
Mhm.
all throughout the city,
Yeah.
West Fourth, be it the Rucker, things like that. Clark Kent, he was on the radio, so I
Mhm.
knew about him through the Mr. Magic Marley Marl show on the
Mhm.
radio, and Clark Kent was DJing, and I was like, okay, he's using this name, Clark Kent, DJ Clark Kent. Like, I envision him being this big guy, and he is. He's a big man, and just his personality and what he would be able to do with music, right? Like, just continues to speak to me. And then you hear about just different players all throughout the city, and you'd go to these different courts, and I'd just be like going, wow, watching the game, but also what am I looking at? I'm looking at people's feet
Yeah.
wearing Air Force Ones, who's rocking with the strap, hanging in the back,
Who's
who's
rocking the mids?
who's rocking the mids, which there weren't mids. It was either highs or lows at
Oh
that
yeah,
point
yeah,
in time.
yeah.
We're talking early 90s. And then, be it Adidas Forums, Etonic, Spot Built, um, oh my goodness. I mean, there's so many, and this is all like, blacktop
Yeah.
ball, no blood, no
A-
foul. And
no,
eventually
Avias during that time, I think.
ideas, like be
Yeah.
it the 825s or the 830s.
Mhm.
Um, John Sally, Spider Sally was rocking those in the league. This is when the bad boys were doing their thing, back-to-back champions. Um, or Reebok, BB 4600s.
Mhm.
You had that whole team, Robert Parrish, Bird, obviously, with his weapon. Um, and then eventually fast forward, D Brown with the pumps. I mean, come
Mm.
on, like, that whole
That was earth shattering at that
oh
moment.
man, like I had to have those. I had to have those. I mean, I think I probably have like one or two pairs sitting, but if I try to pull them out, they probably disintegrate in my hand. you
That
know,
pump is not working. You there be like
not working.
that ball's one pump in, it's just gonna go right
Done,
in.
done. Yeah.
I mean, that's wild. I mean, I because like I came after, right? Like
Okay.
2000s. That's where I want to say like so like the 90s I feel are when I look back at it or like when I read into it, it's like 90s is the idea of sneaker culture.
Mm,
2000s is when people were like, "Oh nah, this is how you got to do it." And
mhm.
like it took the 10 years, that century mark of just being
Oh,
like
absolutely.
for people to be like, "No, no, no. Like we are a community,"
Right.
and I mean, I don't know what it was like. Were you able to be around the birth of that? Like, I mean, it felt like the birth of hip hop. Like, were you around to be like, were you around during that time? Because I mean, you're well. The one thing, because like I had this thought in my head, you were basically the sneaker community in on the island. You
Mm,
move to Brooklyn. You're
right.
noticing, oh snap, there's other people like me,
Yep.
and then from there you build community because
Right.
that's the through line. But then you're like, okay, I'm going to college and I still do my commuting during this time. So like, were you around and seeing the culture being bred and bought? Because the only reason I'm bringing this up is because of your hat. So like, I
Oh,
just
absolutely.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah.
well, it's and you know the sneaker community is just that. It's a culture. It really is. Like my culture in the islands was really my cousins. So my cousins David and Cornell, the three of us were like we were the sneaker community.
Hmm.
Everyone would look to us because we always one, we had the fresh kicks, and two, we had them before everyone else because of our connection to New York City.
Hmm.
Our family, who lives in the States, we would hit them up, be like, yo, send you a money order. I need you to go get these Air Max ones in size 13 and then ship them to me. Here, here's a money order with extra for ship. Like we were doing that
Hmm.
in the 80s. Fast forward, David graduates before me, moves to New York. I graduate 91. I moved to Brooklyn, eventually go to school around, but we were all together and the community of sneakers came out of hip hop. Like there's
Hmm.
no denying that. Like hip hop gave birth to
Of
the sneaker
course.
culture, right?
Yeah.
And being in New York City for me, that was like I got to see everything. I got to see how people were wearing everything from the women wearing high heels on the subway walking through the city to then all of a sudden, like summer of 89, I'll never forget being in Manhattan because I'm working as a production assistant. This is before I
Hmm.
graduated high school now. And I'm noticing a lot of women wearing what? Reebok 5411s. And I was like, wow, a lot. I mean, I'm seeing white, I'm seeing the bubblegum pink.
Hmm.
I'm seeing yellow ones. And I'm like, okay. And I would see women with their little bag because what they were doing was what I was doing in high school or elementary. They would wear their sneakers and then get to the office and then change into their high heels or dress shoes.
I want to make this joke. I just want to make this joke real quick. Switching to their Malone Bonics.
I was doing that when I was in elementary.
Yeah.
I went to a parochial school, right?
Hmm.
On the islands, we all wear uniforms. So it doesn't matter if you go to public school or if you go to parochial private school or not. You wear a uniform. The uniform was you had to wear black or brown shoes.
Mm.
Well, guess what? This guy, I had to have my sneakers on. I would carry my black or brown shoes, get to homeroom just before the bell would ring. I'd switch,
Switch.
right? Put my dress shoes on, be it my Eastlands, be it my Bally's, be it whatever shoes I was rocking at that time, my
Hmm.
Timberlands. And then soon as the bell would ring at the end of school, switch back, put my
Hmm.
sneakers back on. My Bo Jackson trainers, my Air Jordan fours, fives, um, um, uh, Pony, City High Wings
Hmm.
that Spud Webb wore. I mean, I would always switch my sneakers, and that's how I kind of became. I became known as the sneaker guy unofficially, even in my class. Like, I remember introducing. This is how crazy it is. 1986, I discovered the Timberland 5009. So
Okay.
5000, you can look up.
I'm gonna have to.
It's a three eyelet, hand sewn burgundy moccasin.
Uh huh.
it became the parochial school shoe that Timberland makes. It's got a big lug sole.
Oh
And,
yeah, yeah, yeah. They brought these
yeah,
back
and they brought them
recently.
back.
Yeah.
So I've been buying that shoe since 1986. I
Wow.
introduced that shoe in the Virgin Islands. People used to make fun of me. My boy's like, yo, you wearing high heel shoes, whatever. Look. Next year, what is everyone rocking? 5,009s.
5009s.
Or if they didn't want to spend the money because they were expensive, they would get the Eastland version.
I was gonna say
Right?
Perry Ellis, but I'm pretty sure Perry Ellis wasn't there, wasn't around
Ariela's
there.
not yet,
Yeah.
but nonetheless, I mean, so the whole culture, like you said, the whole sneaker culture, footwear culture, all that. Fast forward, I got to see it and think about it. Like when the first Jordan was retro, the first Jordan that was retro was 1994,
Right.
and guess what happened? They sat and they got marked down.
They were in bins at that point. That's why
Exactly.
that's why the skaters were skating them at once they got to them. So yeah.
So like I got to see all that, and then obviously with the onset of the internet, that opened things up. Like
Mhm.
I remember being on the internet in 95 and the internet was just like talk about like baby steps. By 96 there's actually like rooms, chat rooms, just like AIM chat rooms and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And people are talking about sneakers. And then all of a sudden someone figured out how to create a website and actually put a picture, scan a picture and somehow put it on this website. Fast forward to places like Nike Talk. I discovered Nike Talk in 1999.
Mhm.
That's when I first, I was like, wow, there's actually a whole community of people like me that are like us talking about sneakers and can tell you stories or like how they look for a particular pair of sneakers. And then when they get it, what is like that eureka moment. So yeah, I mean, to see where it is now with everything from Instagram to TikTok,
Yeah.
here we are on a podcast, on your podcast, talking about sneakers. Who knew that this is what we do here around 2023? Hip hop is celebrating 50 years this year.
Right.
So sneaker culture is just as, is right there.
It's really wild, right? This ride that it took,
Mm,
and then like where we are now. And I really wanted to touch on the current state of it now
yeah.
because I mean, I've had conversations about it. I mean, there's a lot of people that complain about it, the way it is and how it is. And I think the see, this is such a touchy subject, but I like to I pushed the button. I'm down to
Yeah.
push the buttons, but I don't think there is a sneaker culture now. I think there's people
Mm,
that think they're in the sneaker culture, but then when
okay.
you call them out on like, oh, so you don't understand like how this all started, and
Mm,
then you try to ask them or like, because like, look, I'm on TikTok. I make TikToks, right? And then I'm the only one, or I'm one of the few people that will talk about the story or talk about the influences of the shoe.
mm,
So, for instance, one of my recent ones, I talk about Action Bronson's New Balance,
okay.
right? The Baklavas they drop. I people are saying it's ugly, and then I go, but you have to understand how colors work, and you have to understand where sneaker culture comes from, right? At one point, everybody in the sneaker game or whatever you want to call it who was collecting sneakers they only wore bright stuff, and so for such a long stretch it was who's the most outlandish. Oh, you're
Yeah.
wearing cheetah print, oh snap, nah, we know you part
Yeah.
of it, you
Yeah.
know. And so when I try to explain that to kids who just only buy, oh the Travis Scotts or the whatever sneakers is pushing and saying like, oh yeah, this is the new hot stuff.
Yeah.
I think it falls on deaf ears when you try to explain what culture is, and then
Mm,
how do we expand on that instead of siloing it, and then and then people getting called gatekeepers, but then it's just like it's I mean, I don't know how much you've dealt with this, but
oh,
but
all the time, all the
yeah.
time. I mean, this brand is just that. It's called Protect Our Culture,
Hmm.
and it's a new brand that's we're in the midst of launching. I'm in the midst of our brand that we're about to launch, and it's just that it's Protect Sneaker Culture, where culture is to be celebrated. We're not gonna all like the same stuff, which is just that. We're all human beings. We're all different, different shape, sizes, colors, you name it.
Mhm.
So sneaker culture to me is going to be different than for you, and
Right.
that's okay. We can agree to disagree. It's just like I can look at a pair of sneakers, and every sneaker is going to give me or evoke an emotion, right? Either
Mhm.
I'm going to love it or I may hate it, and it's either or. I may look at a sneaker in the beginning and say, "Man, that is ugly as trash."
Mhm.
But then I start seeing it more, and then I start doing research on the story or the design inspiration, things like that. And then I start liking it, and eventually I may actually love it. And
Mhm.
that's amazing to go from one end of the spectrum all the way to the next one and be able to have a disagreement with someone, but be like, cool, if you don't like it, all right.
Yes.
For example, I remember the first time I saw, the Nike Yeezys, I was like, horrible. Can't stand them.
Mhm.
I saw the design, I see what he did and mashing it all up. But I appreciate what he did for the culture
Right.
at the point in time. Even fast forward to the Yeezy stuff, what he did for the culture. Again, I know the designers behind them. I know Steven Smith. I know Jeff Henderson. I know some other folks that had a direct hand in designing those sneakers. They're not for me, and that's okay. But I still can identify and say, I know what it did for the culture. I know why he did what he did.
Mhm.
Um, just like, one of my favorite Jordans, people look at me and like, why do you like that sneaker? It was different. The Bordeaux Air Jordan 7.
Right.
I have my original pair from 1991 still sitting here and never worn. And that sneaker will always be important to me. That's my greatest of all time sneaker.
Mhm.
My second in line would probably be the Air Force 180 Charles Barkley sneakers,
Mhm.
blue red, simple. Um, then you get into like Puma Clydes and stuff like that. But lately, I mean, I've been like on a New Balance, Air Max One kick. That seems like I literally have like three or four pairs sitting by the door, and I'm just like, whoop, that's what I'm wearing today. Keep it moving.
Mhm.
The culture is just that. It's going to continue to change. It's not going to remain constant.
Right.
We need people like you and ultimately us to keep telling these stories so people understand the history. Because if we don't do that, people forget.
Right.
Your show is very important because at some point we are no longer going to be here in the physical, but someone can go back and look at it and say, on this date and time in 2023, Hassan and Dee were talking about sneaker culture, and now it's 2033, or it's whatever, 50 years in the future.
Mhm.
Wow, look what they were talking about back then. Look how things have changed. Either something's got retroed and recycled. So
Yeah, I mean, you bring a very important point because I think what is really lost now is the ability to have a conversation. Like everybody's so opinionated on what
oh,
we should like, what we shouldn't like.
yeah.
Because like perfect example, and I mean, I talk about this in my last episode, one of
Hmm.
my last episodes, but I made a video about the Air Jordan 16s and how I don't like them. Right?
Mhm.
I made a couple jokes because these are, and so what I like to do is I don't go, you're wrong, you shouldn't like them. I go, I don't like them. Here's a funny story about them, and then I make jokes, right? Man, I'll tell you, I was getting lambasted. Like, what's
Yeah.
wrong with you? The 16s were fire, blah blah blah, right? But I told the story in the story, and they just threw the story away. They were just,
Yep.
I'm wrong. And I'm just like, what? But like, I remember having, like, the best part about being in sneakers back in like 90s, 2000s was like, you can have an opinion,
Mm,
right? And then you could just have the battle of being like, oh, okay, you like these, all right, cool, but I'm still not gonna like them. And then you
right.
just and
Keep
then
moving.
yeah, exactly. Or and then it's also like, oh, okay, I understand it. And then you start coming around on it, you start loving it, and then you're like, all right, now I need a pair. Like,
Exactly.
but it's the chance, that one chance of like, now you're being put on a journey, but people are
Hmm.
so quick to just chop you at the legs and not let you come to get on a journey for any specific pair, right?
Yeah.
um it's just it's so daunting, and I don't know, Like, that's why I think, like, I understand when it's like people that are who are new into just like trying to buy sneakers, and they
Mm,
feel like they're being gate kept about it, or like, because they don't understand that, you can just get a shoe, and you can have your own story based around this shoe. And
yeah.
that's once you tell that story, you sold that shoe to that person, right? You have the conversation starter. So just continue doing that, and then your collection will grow. You'll have sneakers in your collection that mean so much more than something like than Nike telling you, okay, this is a story about such and such, So,
Well, that's it, and that's where social media, and you're absolutely right. Social media and the so-called influencers came on board, right? Like,
mhm,
because they do just that. They've influenced how we as consumers buy stuff. What do we think? All of a sudden we're being told what is cool and what's not cool. I'm like, if you think this pen is cool, then okay, that's your opinion. I could think it's cool too, or I could not. But I still does that doesn't mean I don't like you.
right.
It means like I could take my hard-earned money and buy this pen, just like I can take my hard-earned money and buy this sneaker.
Mhm,
Again, someone may look at this and say, "That is the most ugliest piece of leather and rubber I've ever seen." I'm like, "This is a wearable piece of art to me. I can't wear it right now. I can put
mhm,
it on display for us to talk about on your show and talk about the history of it." But again, that's how I look at sneakers. They're wearable pieces of art. You either like them or you don't.
mhm,
Some are gonna resonate, but to me, I like to dive deeper into the who designed them, what was their inspiration,
mhm,
what is the story there, and then be like, okay, so what problems, right? What problems does it address?
mhm,
Does it fix something or does it address a problem for me or for the intended audience? Be it sneakers now that you could put your feet in that you don't actually have to bend down and tie because they're auto lace systems, or or um or just think about with kids with Velcro and even light up sneakers. Like that was a huge, I mean, that's a huge business that
right.
came out of right of
Mhm,
just a simple need. Like kids don't like to tie their shoelaces. They just want to be able to put them on, and what do they wanna do? They wanna go play. They wanna have fun. They don't wanna
mhm.
be spending time bunny ears and through the loop and Velcro, slap it closed, boom, gone, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I totally want to talk about like your inspiration into starting, social studies,
Mm,
sorry, I tried to memorize all
no
the,
problem.
all the
Yeah.
organizations and classes you put on, but I can you
So,
break those down?
social studies came out of literally doing the podcast. So, starting the OSD podcast in 2007,
Mm-hmm.
we realized that we had people from all the brands listening to the show and learning from us,
Mm-hmm.
and really realizing that what we were doing was teaching about the footwear industry. So we took it one step further. We created social studies on purpose to actually teach, people, particularly young folks, either one, how to get into the footwear industry and work at one of the companies, or possibly even start your own company
Mm-hmm.
or your own, basically your own brand. Um, so we started talking about that, and the more and more we've had these workshops and classes, they've just grown. I mean, right now, we're in the midst of another growth phase for OSD and social studies. We're about to open a community academy in New York City.
Wow.
We're going to have classes. People will be able to come in and actually sit through multiple, be it a 3 week, 4 week, or even a 6 week program and learn all about the industry. But then also, if they really want to, go and either intern or get a job at one of the footwear companies. So we have some really cool stuff. I think, your viewers and listeners are going to want to hear and see. So I'm certainly encouraging people to follow me, D Wells OSD, on all social media platforms. Follow Social Studies, SOLECIAL,
Mm-hmm.
Social Studies on Instagram. But we have some stuff really coming because we don't want to, again, we don't want to be the gatekeepers. We want to take what we know, take the network that we've built, and
Mm-hmm.
actually share it with as many people as possible, because information, we know, is really, it sounds cliche, no, but information is key. If you don't know, that means you're losing out on an opportunity. But if you know something, if I can help you learn something or get a little further step down the road, that's a win. That's a win where all of a sudden I helped you and now you can help 3 or 4 people. Let's multiply that.
Yeah.
Let's get more black and brown people in the footwear industry, because guess what? I just don't want us all to be consumers.
Hmm.
Let's be creatives too. What if you have this beautiful idea to take and create a brand that's based upon your story, your life, and your cultural, background with Brazil and everything else. And all of a sudden you can further that and again inspire some, young ladies or some young men somewhere. And again, it lights that spark for them. So that's what it's about. That's what social studies is about. I mean, we've been able to teach social studies in Germany, in France, in the Caribbean, in New York City, in Boston, in Houston,
Hmm.
Texas, all over. So we're expanding, we're growing, we're growing.
So then how do you talk to the kids about, like, you can expand on this. It doesn't have to just be, buying sneakers and posting them on the gram. Like,
Exactly.
how do you talk to these kids like that?
So we use sneakers as a teaching tool. I mean, I wish, huh, I wish teachers back when I was in elementary through middle school and high school had used sneakers to really connect with me. And that's what we've done. We're using basically sneakers to teach, not just STEM, science, technology,
Hmm.
engineering, and mathematics. We actually are teaching STEAM. You can't forget the A. The A is the arts. I mean, people like to draw and sketch. People like to doodle. So take what they're doing on a daily basis and let's help them take that and maybe go from pen and paper or pencil and paper to now digitizing that. And then, well, again, working through the ideation process. Like maybe you have an idea to make a backpack better or a water bottle better. There's someone that designs everything that we use. That's what
Hmm.
we use to teach these, young folks. Like I use a pair of sneakers when I go into the classroom because guess what? This is a tangible visual, and people see this swoosh, and the kids they know it, right?
Right.
Say, well, do you know that there was probably 15 jobs, 15 jobs to make this sneaker come to a store shelf.
Hmm.
Everything from sourcing of materials to the marketing to packaging to shipping, procurement, all that, accounting and finance. So we talk about that. And then all of a sudden, what does that do? It opens their minds to like, well, I like math. I want to do the cost analysis on that sneaker now. Or I like the storytelling, AKA the marketing. Okay, now you can do that. So again, it's taking sneakers and using them as a teaching tool to really open, young folks' minds. And it's not just young folks, it's really everyone because we've gone from elementary as young as probably third grade
Hmm.
all the way up to MBA programs and professionals at different companies. Like we've gone into companies and actually given the history of a sneaker that the employees didn't even know about their own brand,
Wow.
and we tie in the cultural significance or touch points, like talking about Reaganomics, talking about hip hop and Public Enemy,
Hmm.
um, 911 is a joke, KRS-One, Boogie Down. Again, making these connections to pop culture, even where all of a sudden someone's going, that was my childhood. Like I was
Hmm.
living through that. Movies like Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Jess Spicoli knocking his head, with a van slip on and
Hmm.
checkerboard, or White Men Can't Jump, or Boys in the Hood. I mean, all these again movies that we could talk about sneakers in them that people like. I didn't realize that. And I was like,
Hmm.
okay, do the right thing. I mean, look at
I mean,
Spike Lee bugging out. I
I
mean,
need those. I
Raid
need those.
Raheem. I mean, come on.
I need those fours, man.
Man.
I have some M4s, but I need those do the right thing fours. It's I that's so dope because
We use all the touch points. Yeah, that's what
yeah,
we do.
that's really dope because I will say that is the most fun part for me, right?
Mm,
I love like connecting the dots to go to that, and like
exactly.
that's what I love about sneaker culture in general, because like when I first got into it and collecting SBs, like you learn about these skate shops, you learn about why they put these sneakers together and why, what they use, what did this represent, what is the community around the shoe. um but like learning, because like my big obsession was uh it's the boutique shops from back in the 2000s. You got your
Mm,
Recon North, DQM, so clientele.
wow.
Like
Those are
I
the spots. Yeah.
yeah, those were my spots that I frequented every single day for like 5 years. And
Mhm.
so the what like that's where my knowledge comes from, right? So like, I love hip hop and stuff like that, but like the idea that like you can start your own little shop, and then you can get Nike to sell you sneakers so that you can sell sneakers. Then if you sell enough, you can get your own sneaker. Like it was like I was like, this is possible. Like that's that's the way I looked at it. I mean, I even had Dave Ortiz on this podcast, and I was like, I spent the whole episode just being like, oh my god, you don't know what you mean to me. Like so so
Awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a while, like the circle that you can see where it connects back to you, right? Because like that little series of the clerks pack that Nike put out, right? That series started this crazy obsession with different materials, different colors, and having meanings, with dunks, and or with the Air Force One. I mean, with the Air Max One, or with the like even with the artist series, and I'm a big graffiti head, so like I
Mhm.
love like all like Haze and Stash and Espo, like all that stuff. Like I once I jumped into sneaker culture, like the actual sneaker culture, not just being like, okay, I'm only gonna buy this specific shoe because I love this shoe. Once I jumped into it, it was like, oh my god, there was just like peeling, like you just peel the onion, and you just keep going. You're like, whoa, there's more onions. Like you just
Yep,
keep
there's
going.
more
So
to this. Yep.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I love that you're taking that aspect of sneakers
Mhm.
and expanding it wider than just going back. So yeah,
Absolutely.
it's super sick.
Yep.
But so as we go down to the end of this podcast,
Okay.
I have one last question.
Yes, sir.
All right, I want you to remember about the time where you bought those Cortezes, those the
Mhm.
first when you were a kid. We're going
Right.
to kid, right? Kid. Now, before you open that box as a kid, you yourself now goes back in time, and you're standing behind yourself. What would you tell little D
Hmm.
as he opens that box?
To remember this moment in time, to remember how hard you worked to save the money to buy them. You bought these sneakers with your own money. Um, enjoy them enjoy them for their intended purpose to wear, be it to run a little bit, but more importantly, to look good and feel good. So you remember that, remember the moment, like live in the moment, soak it all in, take your time, open the box, observe, pull them out. If you want to sniff them and smell it, that's okay. But just to be able to hold them, as I would, I mean, I'd be like, just hold it and look at it and observe and look at all the little things, like the little details, the stitching, the sole, even the glue, like how it was done. Like someone's hands touched that sneaker before you did. And there's a
Mhm.
lot of people that were involved to get it to this moment in time. So I would say that I'd say all of that. And then I'd probably end with you'll be forever changed
Mhm.
because of this moment right now. You may not know it right now, but you'll be forever changed. Not to kind of do any Back to the Future changing future stuff. I still would be like, your life is forever changed.
Yeah. No, there's no we're not you're not disappearing in the picture. And
Exactly.
you're not going back
Exactly.
in time.
Yeah.
Oh man, beautifully said. Thank you. Beautifully said. Thank you so much for jumping on the podcast, D.
Thanks
And
for having me, Hassan. I really appreciate
yeah.
you.
And for everybody out there, you know what we say every week, wear your kicks. Peace.